about some of the changes that have occurred in her lifetime. Orpha, tell me, where were you born? When and where?
I was born January the 25th, 1902, out at Andis, Ohio, a little country town out in the county.
So how do you think that your life was different than your mother's? How long did your mother live?
My mother only lived to be 52. She died with cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, here I am, 92.
Uh-huh.
Lived a long life, and so a life so entirely different to what she lived. She was a really mother. People back there them days, if you was a mother, you was a mother. You was a real mother.
Uh-huh.
You weren't just a part way. I had a real mother. Worked hard. And of course, most all people did back them days.
So how was your life different than hers then?
Well, maybe I had more privileges than she did. She was from a family of 8 girls and 2 boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think maybe my life was different to hers because she was raised on a big farm.
Uh-huh.
And they had to farm and work on the farm. And then when they grew older, then they went out and did housework. That's all it was for young girls to do back there then. Them days, you know, there was no factories or no industries for them to work. And they went out and did housework. That's what they did. And so one by one, as they grew older, that's what they did. They left home. And I know my mother worked for a family in here in town in Bixby's that had a jewelry store. And she said they were so nice to her, such nice people to work for.
So how was your life different than that? You say she worked hard. I'm sure you worked hard too. You worked hard at different things.
I did about just the same, but my job was always a babysitter.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I didn't.
You mean as a young lady, as a young woman?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Before you got married?
I had one sister that she cried of a night, and I'd have to get up and rock her, you know, rock her half of the night. And I used to get so mad at her I could tear her a piece. The thing about it, she'd say, "Orphy, get up and rock me and sing 'Power in the Blood of the Lamb.'" That was her song. Only one she knew, I think. It wasn't her favorite at all. It was just the only one she knew. And I'd have to get up in the cold of the night and rock her and sing "Power in the Blood of the Lamb." And I remember the night my dad said to her, "You lay down there and go to sleep." He said, "I'll power in the blood of the Lamb you." And that was it.
How old were you at the time, do you know?
Well, I'm 10 years older than she, and she about that time was she's old enough to quit crying at night. I would say maybe she's 3 or 4 years old, so that'd be about how old I'd be.
So tell me, how and when did you decide to get married?
Oh, that was a quick decision. I was married when I was 17. I met Les, my husband, and I was engaged to another fellow, and he was in service. And, now imagine me, then I was 16. I wasn't even 17. I was 17 when I was married, but I was 16. And I think I did that to get rid of him. I was glad him when he went in the Army because I didn't care that much about him, and I hated to tell him no, no, and that's something I would have just said no, and that's it, But then I didn't. And I thought, oh, he's gone. Maybe he'll never come back. He's gone in service,
This was in World War II then, or World War I?
World War I.
Yes, okay.
One. And so he went in service, and he was gone for quite a lengthy time, maybe 2 years. I don't remember whether he was in France. Most of the older boys that went to France, and fought in France. But Fred didn't, I don't think he ever got that far in. But anyway, be as it may, I met a fellow that I married, and they had a coal mine up the road from where we lived. And he passed our house every day, and he had a little spotted pony that he pulled the coal out of the bank with, And so that pony would break loose sometimes and get loose from me, and he'd have one time catching it. But anyway, I was just passing, to and from work. I'd be going to work as he was going this way to work, they had coal mines up in what they call Beech Grove, in a hollow there in the hills. There, the Beech Grove School, an old-timey school. I don't know if it's still standing there or not, but I have a picture. I went there a couple of years to school, and I have the picture of the school. But anyway, he stopped me one morning. I was going to work, and he was going to work, but we passed each other. And he said, would you like to go to the show with me some evening? And I think that was the words he used, but anyway, I was so elated and so surprised that I really didn't know what to say. And I said, one thing I'd have to ask my mother. You know, I never would dare to say I was going someplace unless I asked her first. We just did that. So he said, okay, and I said, I don't know whether I could go. I think it was on a Monday night or something like that. I won't say for sure, but anyway, I told him I couldn't go this evening. I'm sure of that. But I said, I'll tell you one morning when I'm going to work again. I'll tell you. I'll stop and tell you. And he said, okay. So he went on his way, and I did. And I was so happy. And he was a good-looking fella, and he was such a good fella, and from such a good family. And they had their own grocery store, and they had this coal mine, and a big family of them, but they was all working different directions, and a well thought of family, and I'm happy to say. And so I told him in a day or two after that, I passed him, I just spoke to him, you know, and went on until for 2 or 3 days, and I told him, and I said that my mother said that my sister would have to go with me, and he said, well, it's all right, I'll get her a date. And so he did.
Your older or younger sister?
No, my older sister. She had a boyfriend that was in France, Lester Fields, and she finally married him. But anyway, oh boy, I'll tell you, I was beaming. I just couldn't wait for that date because he had a car, you know.
Is that right? So
God.
this would have been, what, 1918?
1918.
1918?
1918, because I was married in 1919.
Well, that is a big deal.
You better believe it.
Do you remember what kind of car it was?
It was an Oldsmobile. And so now the other girls had fellows, you know, that had a car and would take them places. And it just was really a treat. It was really something. And so we went to the show.
What did you see? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. But it was a little stage play. It was right up here on Center Street, right above Kresge's in one of them buildings there. That's where the show was. That's been a long time ago. And let's see, I've been married, Ivis is 73, will be in November. And
Ivis is your oldest daughter?
That's my oldest. That's the one that had all the broken bones, you know. She's 73. I've been married 76 years. It's 15th February. That's coming February. I was just real young, and I was 17 and he was 19.
So you got married then? How long after your date at the show?
Well, about I really had. He wouldn't have been 19 till November, and I would have been 17 in February. And I thought, no, I'm not going to get married that young. That's just too young. I told him, I said, no. But boy, I was looking forward to it because I thought to marry somebody like he was, and really, he was. He was
a good catch, huh?
He sure was. And they over the family were all so good to me, and his mother and father was so good to me, his mother especially. But I was good to her. They had a big house, about a 9-room house, and she had always done all that cleaning herself, and I was there to help her, you see, and she appreciated it. So we were good buddies until I went to housekeeping. Went to housekeeping, and I worked a year, and then I had my Ivis.
So tell me about your pregnancy with Ivis and the birth of the baby. I mean, what did you know?
Nothing. Just one word.
What were some of the old wives' tales that they talked about? What do you remember being afraid of being pregnant? You just thought it.
Nobody never told me anything.
Uh-huh.
And that's where I think they should have told me, so I would have known what to expect.
Uh-huh. And so what surprised you most about having your first baby then?
But I could imagine all that pain.
Uh-huh.
See, I tell you, I was too young, see, to do all that.
Right.
I was too young to get married.
Mm-hmm.
I look back now and think, but maybe I'd have missed a whole lot if I didn't get married and marry the man that I did.
So, you didn't, when you found out you were pregnant, you just knew? I mean, just because your belly started getting big, or you?
No, I tell you, to tell you the facts, I'd had a lot of problems from the time I started to menstruate, when I got into that age.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to tell you my experience, and I know you'll laugh at this, but anyway, I was about maybe 11 years old when my first experience.
Uh-huh.
And after that, it went on, and nobody never told me anything, and I didn't ask nobody anything. You see, kids back there then, weren't wise like they are today, you know. And I don't know if it's good or bad. But anyway, I pondered that within myself. Was I pregnant? Yeah, I'd heard people saying that, you know, when you didn't menstruate, you're pregnant. And I thought, oh, my Lance, what would I do with the baby if I have a baby?
You knew how babies got
No.
here? You didn't know? Okay.
No.
You just knew they happened most of the time after you got married?
I don't know, I thought maybe it was a germ.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it went on and on, and all of a sudden, I started to menstruate, and I about died. I about cramped to death. And I was afraid to tell my mother. See, you didn't talk to your mother, or my mother didn't, you know. That wasn't things you talked about. But how was you supposed to find out these things you ought to know if your mother didn't tell you? But that's the way they believed, I reckon, back then, that you shouldn't know these things. You know, keep them hid from you. That's a secret. And you know, one of my cousins said to me, said, "Oh, if you was a little older," she said this to me one day, she said, "If you was a little older, I'd tell you something." And
this was after you were married, right?
No, that was before I was married. That's before, when I was in this period of trouble, you see. Within me it was trouble. I didn't know what to think.
Okay, so when you weren't having your period, you thought you...
And then I didn't have any more.
That's,
see?
okay.
Then I was pregnant.
Okay.
See? I thought that's the way you got pregnant.
That's right.
You just got pregnant.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, when Eva said that to me, I began to wonder, what's she going to tell me, or what could she tell me? I thought about that a long time, and I wondered what I would do with a baby if I had it, you know. Now, that's awful to let somebody live in the darkness like that.
So how long did you worry about whether you were pregnant or not?
Or did it? I don't really remember, but I know then when I did menstruate, how I cramped and how much trouble that I had. I just about cramped to death. So you see, I had problems hidden that nobody knew, and back them days they didn't know anything about it, you know. And it'd been terrible if you, a young girl, you know, that went and had anything done with your menstruation, your period, you know. They'd go to the doctor for that. Well, they'd vowed and declared you that you was pregnant, you know. And that's the only thing that could happen. You just be pregnant, you know. That's it. So I don't remember really how I got out of that. I don't know, but it was a long time. And even after I was married, I'd go maybe 4 or 5 months, and I wouldn't menstruate till I got pregnant.
So then when you finally realized you were pregnant, what gave that away? How did you know you were pregnant then?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't really know. I think maybe I felt why. Maybe it occurred to me. See, I still wasn't very old.
Right.
And nobody tell you anything, and how you going to know anything if nobody don't tell you anything?
So you just felt the baby move then? And then how did you share the news with your husband? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I think that he was as elated as I was. And, of course, we were just both kids, and we just took it one day at a time, you know. But when the time came that I had the baby, I could see that how he felt about it. You know, he was never one to ever say much, and he's always a quiet someone. But he must have thought it was a horrible thing to go through, you know.
And you had your children at home?
Well, I had that one at home, the first one. And Dr. Dan Gray, he had a Deaconess Hospital, and he was my doctor. And he came up to the house that evening and stayed all night. Stayed there with me. He was nice enough. I guess he seen that I was all excited and upset.
Now, were you scared to death while you were in labor?
Sure.
Didn't know what was...
I said to my sister-in-law that was there, I said, Lottie, is this going to be any worse? I can't stand it. You know, I was just 17 years old. I was too young to have a baby, if I was that young. But I labored all night. And I finally had the baby, a little girl. And so we talked about what name, and her daddy, Les, said, well, he said, I'll tell you, I'm going to name her Ivis. He had read a story, and the girl's name was Ivis. And he said, now I'm going to name her Ivis, and you can name her what you want. Put that to her. So my sister-in-law had a sister named Dolores. She named her Dolores, so her name's Ivis Dolores.
So then tell me, as a parent with children growing up in the 20s, right? In the 1920s, was that when most of your children were growing up?
Well, yes.
How did, what were one of your biggest worries? What did you worry about as a parent with children that age?
Well, I tell you, I wanted my children to have what I didn't have.
Which was what?
Everything.
You mean material possessions? You wanted them
material.
To have?
But not really all material things, but I wanted to be the best children in the neighborhood.
So how did you accomplish that?
And I never did.
So you worried about them then not being good children?
No, I was afraid they wouldn't. Worried myself to death. Now, you know.
Well, specifically, if they went out for the evening, what did you worry about?
I just worried if they were going to behave and what they were going to do and if they were going to get in trouble, because I knew kids did.
And what kind of trouble would you worry about?
Well, the most thing that I always remembered, and are they with the kind of a boy that will be nice to them rather than mistreat them or something and maybe get them pregnant or something? I thought a lot about that because there was a lot of that going on, you know. And of course, it's always gone on for that matter.
Right.
But I wanted mine to be the best, to be the best dressed, and therefore was far from it, and the cleanest, and the prettiest. I wanted to be the best of everything. And that made pressure on them. It wasn't fair to them.
Have they talked to you about that?
No.
I mean, since then, you know,
No,
as adults, did they say, "Mom, you were just you expected too much"?
No, they never said about expecting too much. Midge was this year. She talked about going to church, and she said, "Mother, I can remember going to the Nazarene church up at First Nazarene when I was growing up. We lived in that neighborhood there, and it was the closest to the church to where we lived. So we had no transportation, and that's where they had to go, and she didn't like it. But she never did tell me that, so just she mentioned it last night. She said, oh, I hated to go there to church. And I said, Midge, why didn't you say something about it? Maybe you could have got on the streetcar and went downtown and to one of the churches. You know, for Sunday school, they never went to church at night, but they went but anyway, they never complained. Whatever I told them to do, that's what they did. And they didn't always have to do that. They could have done what they wanted to do.
If they would have just said something.
If they said something about it.
What kind of behavior did your children exhibit that absolutely horrified you? I mean, what could they do that really upset you?
Well, I'm happy to say that that wasn't the kind of children I had. They seemed to be obedient. They knew what they're supposed to do and not to do. And I think they tried their best. I really do. I think to live up to my expectations.
So what kind of discipline did you use with your girls? You had 4, right? 4 daughters?
Yeah, I had 4. 4. Well, maybe you'd get on their back about things. You'd have to, you know. Now you
Uh-huh.
did this and don't do it no more and all this and that. But that's about the extent of it. And I never had no much problems with them.
Never had any whippings
No,
or anything like that,
no,
just because you
no.
felt that the girls were good
Well,
girls
they
then.
they were good, and they still are. They still are good kids. They've got good kids.
What kind of you mentioned them going out and being worried about the boys they were with. What did they do? Now let's see. They would have been. Were all of your daughters born in the 20s? Is that correct?
I was born in 20,
Mm-hmm.
25, 27, and 29.
Mm-hmm.
28. Sally was born in 28. The baby
Uh-huh.
was born in 28.
So they were actually
All in
just
the
starting to date then in the late
Mhm.
30s,
Uh-huh.
right around the Second World War then.
And I used to think, now this is terrible to say, and I wouldn't want to say this out, maybe they think I really had problems. But I used to think, what would I do if one of my girls would bring a colored baby home?
Uh-huh. And so that worried you. Were there black people living in Andis at the time?
No, I never did for that matter. It's
Uh-huh.
a country town out in the county.
It was just the fear of it was enough to scare you to death?
Because you'd hear about it occasionally
Mm-hmm.
in school, not very often.
Uh-huh.
And you'd hear of the girls dating colored boys, and
Uh-huh.
I was always afraid that mine would.
Mm-hmm. So what did your daughters do then when they were starting to date? I guess growing up during the Depression then. They grew up during
Sure
the
did,
Depression.
and a hard time, but everybody's in the same boat, so it was no different, you know.
Uh-huh.
Most everybody, and people you talk to now, they'll always laugh about the Depression, you know, of what they didn't have and what they'd like them had and everything. But I think everybody was in the same boat, and it was no different.
Did you enjoy watching the show, The Waltons, when it was on? Was that something that
No, I never did.
you never did watch
Uh-uh,
that?
uh-uh.
That's what I think of when I think about the Depression is
Yes.
that show.
The
we
most
watched
thing about the Depression was one day a friend of mine, where did I see him? He had worked, I worked at the cigar factory, and he had worked there. Fritz Hoptry was his name. I have to think this out. He was such a nice fella, and I was downtown. I think that's where it was, and it was in 32.
Mm-hmm.
And I ran into Fritz, and he said, "Orpha, do you know that the bank has closed, the Iron City Bank?" I said, "Land of mercy, no." And he said, "There's people standing over there at the door crying and carrying on. They've closed that bank and took their money, and nobody's got any money. It was all in the Iron City Bank." And the Iron City Bank is where the leader was there, you know, that's where the bank was.
Uh-huh.
And Linda, they took the last dime we had, and I had the 4 children, and my sister stayed with me because she didn't have any home. My mother passed away, and she had no home, and she was with me. And there was 7 of us, and I didn't have a dime. Closed the bank and took the last dime we had.
Now,
the last dime.
so you had your life savings in the bank,
Yes,
didn't you?
we had left. It had been the Depression really started in about 28, I think, and this was in 32.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a comfortable living and had money.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of money, but money.
So what, may I ask, what you considered a lot of money then? What did you have in the bank that you actually
Well,
lost?
We had a car.
Uh-huh.
We had bought a car. When we bought the property we had there, we had 2 pieces of property, and we had a new Chevrolet coupe, and that was something really that everybody didn't have. And I don't really remember how much we lost in the bank, but we had lived about 4 years on the money that we already had because he was working, but nobody wasn't paying him.
Right.
And it wasn't collecting no money.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, there was no money there, no nothing.
Had you thought about taking your money out of the bank before then?
No, nobody there. You had no hint of that, whatever. No.
So then what?
Nobody would have lost their money if they'd had any idea. But they didn't.
So you went home then and told your husband, or asked him, "Is this true? Have you heard this?"
I think he was out maybe hauling coal, and he might have found it out himself before he came home for dinner.
The same day.
Yeah, that I don't really not clear what.
So
it was all gone.
What were your fears then at the time? I mean, did you?
Well, you know what? I said I was young and he was young, and I didn't grow up with a lot of money and a lot of things and everything, and I didn't miss a whole lot. So I just didn't think about it. I was happy. I had my 4 children, and that was a big family. Yeah, I had 3 children in 3 years and 6 months, Linda. Ivis was when Ivis was 7 years old, I just had 1, and when she's 10, I had 4. So I was happy, and I had been used to a lot of money, and just have money to spend for anything you want, to throw. I was never that kind of.
Where did most of your money go on a monthly basis? I mean, were you buying property at the time, or did you rent?
Well, just current expenses, and no, we were paying some building alone, but not a whole lot of money. But then you didn't have a whole lot to spend. You know, you'd be so conservative, thinking it would. Boy, first thing you know, they took it, and there wasn't anything left. There wasn't a penny.
Was your husband more concerned about the lack of money than you?
He was one that never worried. If he worried, he kept it to himself. And he'd just say, we'll make it some way, and we did. That's.
So tell me, how did you celebrate holidays when your girls were growing up? Holidays like Easter or the 4th of July or Christmas.
Well, it all went for them. Anything that buy new outfits, they always you do your best to get them a new outfit and go to church and look pretty. Look nice. I always want them to look nice, and they didn't. They didn't look any nicer than anybody else's. I wanted to.
Did you sew for them? Or did you buy them boughten dresses, as they say?
There was a lady up there on Lorraine Street that was a friend of the family, and she did the best of sewing. I did some of the things that they'd wear, but she did their best of sewing. And I missed a lot, that I could have made their clothes and made them pretty and fixed them up.
So
but
what
she
about?
Always made them nice. They always looked nice.
What about things like Easter baskets or?
They
Christmas
always had
trees.
They always had. They seen that they had a Christmas tree, and when we had the candles, Les would light the candles, but he'd go in the living room with them where the tree was, and he'd light the candles, and he'd stand there with them and watch them burn and let them enjoy that. And then he'd put them all out so they wouldn't get on fire. And that's what you had to do before they had electric bulbs. See, that's been that long.
When did you usually put the Christmas tree up?
Well, anytime they wanted to, 2 or 3 days, anytime they this.
So it was just 2 or 3 days before Christmas, though.
You just might as well put that tree up because there was no peace for nobody until they got that tree up.
Do you have a special Christmas that you remember that was particularly memorable?
Well, they were all good Christmas. We always had a good Christmas.
Do you remember a special gift that you got that you?
Yes, I remember my first Christmas that I was married. I was married in February of 1919, and then the next year at Christmas time, Les got me a Hoover sweeper and a set of silverware, and I thought that was really a nice Christmas present.
And it was.
So,
So as your kids were growing up, did you worry any about the meals that you prepared for them? Did you worry about their nutrition, or did you just fix them whatever you?
People didn't know what the word nutrition meant.
So what was a common breakfast that you would serve your family?
We always had hot biscuits of a morning, and either pork sausage or biscuits and eggs and gravy or something like that.
Mhm.
A good big hot breakfast.
No cold cereal, huh?
Well, they wasn't too much for cereal. They liked their hot biscuit. Les always liked it. He wanted hot biscuits for his breakfast in the morning.
Mm-hmm. So what time would you get up to prepare those biscuits?
Oh, I always got up at 6 o'clock, at least 6 o'clock, and have everything ready. That'd be the first thing you do, turn the oven on in the kitchen, get the oven hot. So that
you say turn the oven on. You had gas?
I had gas. And bake the hot biscuits because he wouldn't eat if he didn't have biscuits. He wouldn't eat toast.
And then what time did he leave the house then?
About 7 o'clock.
So you got up first, did you, and got things
No,
started?
we most always got up. We had coal fires, you see. We had our own coal and had grates, and he fixed the fires and got them going. But the kitchen, I had a gas stove in there, and I turned that on. That'd get the oven hot to bake the biscuits. That's the way we managed it.
And then what was a common lunch and dinner meal?
Well, it was a hot meal on the table at noon. He came home for dinner, and he really liked pie. And I tried to have pie, some kind of pies baked by noon for him to have. See, that's the way people did them days. They don't do that.
No, we go to Pick and Save. So did you worry about, oh gosh, I fixed this same thing yesterday, or what am I going to fix for lunch?
There were certain things they liked. They all had their likes and their dislikes. And I tried to have what each one of them liked. Maybe it was honey with their biscuits, or maybe it was apple butter, or maybe it was sausage, or maybe it was bacon. And I tried to fix it all. I got up in the morning and had what they liked. And they always seemed to enjoy their breakfast.
And your supper meal was the big meal of the day, was it, or not?
No, usually that was leftovers.
Okay. Okay.
But I had a hot meal at noon, and just about every day at noon I had some kind of pies baked.
And what were some of the pies that you usually fixed?
Well, he used to love blackberry for one thing, and if I had the blackberries, so that's what we had, a blackberry pie. And I baked a lot of custard pies. The kids like custard pies. I made a lot of custard pies. So
do you still parent today? Are you still a mom to your kids?
I try to be.
And what's important to you in that role?
Well, I want to be the same mother that I've always been. I want them to be my kids, you know.
Do they cooperate?
Sometimes. Sometimes. And I was good. Now I treat my boys just like I do my girls. I don't have no boys of my own. But I got some son-in-laws that I love because they're so good to me. They treat me, I know they're not any better to their own mother than they are to me.
So
they come in and hug me and kiss me, and I think that's important, rather than not speak to you or something. You know.
What's your biggest concern with your grown daughters now?
Well, I wouldn't know.
So you feel comfortable with their lives?
I never had, not one of my girls. I just said, Ivis, not very long ago, I said, Ivis, do you ever remember the time that you came home from school and had to wash dishes? She said, no. Do you ever remember ever washing dishes? No. Not a one of my girls can say that they ever come home from school and wash dishes, or ever went in the kitchen and cooked anything. They never fixed anything. I fixed their meals. They sat down at the table, and I put it on the table for them all their life. And in the summer when they weren't, but most always they had little jobs that they did. They worked at Kresge's or Newberry's or somebody's. They worked about all the time, and they couldn't work and do that. And I didn't expect them to. I did their laundry, and sometimes they'd have to iron their own clothes, but I most always ironed them and put them away.
Didn't you ever worry that maybe you weren't giving them enough to do to teach them how to be good mothers themselves?
No, because I had to work, and I didn't want them to do what I had to do. No, and that's one thing. I never let them take care of the younger one under them, you know. And never. Because I said that's what I always had to do, and I just liked it, and I would never make my children do it, and I didn't.
So how did they raise their children differently than you raised theirs? Is that a hard question?
Well, no, I think that they had good children. I've got a whole bunch of them here. Let me see if I can give them to you. You see this house? You see this house here?
Uh-huh.
That's my granddaughter's house that she just bought in Mansfield.
Oh, my.
She moved from Nashville, Tennessee to Knoxville, Tennessee to Mansfield, and that's the house she bought. That's her home. And this is my daughter Sally, and me is sitting on her new patio at her home in Columbus.
So
and here we are on that's the same back porch. That's where I was at last summer, and I was sitting there. And this is Midge and Ed. Now that's the one that worked at Ashton Oil I'm telling you about.
Uh-huh.
And they just had their 50th wedding anniversary, and that's one of the pictures.
So your daughters have done well then?
Oh, yes. Sally, this one here, she started to put her elbow up on a shelf there at the restaurant where we're eating, and they happened to get that like that. But there was me, and there's Midge, and there's Ed, there's her husband, and here's their son, and here is their daughter. They got a son and a daughter both, and they go to a special school in Columbus.
So how many grandchildren do you have then?
I have 12 grandchildren. I don't know how many, I've got 27 great-grandchildren. And this is Midge's boy. He's an attorney, and his is his wife, and she's an attorney. They both work. She works for the Attorney General, and he works for an insurance company. And this is my daughter, lives in Hillsborough, and she just had surgery there. And this is Ed. That's my brother, or my son-in-law. He come there to tell me something. I don't know what he's telling me, and that's his son. And here's his 3 boys and him and her. And here's the 3 boys and him and her.
Well, you certainly have a nice-looking family.
Oh, and they're good. I had the time to tell you all about them, and they're lovely. And
So, you know, in today's world, I know I'm a parent myself.
Yeah.
I worry about all kinds of things with my daughters, from the friends they have at school to their schoolwork to where are they going to find a job when they do get out of school, and how much education are they going to be able to manage to acquire. Did you have those same kind of worries that I have today, or do you think that parents
I had
today?
their life planned, but it absolutely not one of them did what I wanted to do. Sally was always quick to learn, and she loved her school books, her schoolwork. She liked all that went with it, you know. She loved school. And I thought, well, Sally, I'm going to make a teacher out of Sally. And Rita is the nurse. That's her picture's there on that one there. She just had major surgery. But Rita was always so kind to people, and it seemed like that she could apply herself well. If whoever it was sick or something, you know, she seemed to know what to do for him. I thought, well, she might make a good nurse. And Midge, the one that you've seen her picture there, she got them flowers for her anniversary. They just celebrated their 50th year, her graduation exercise. And she'll make a beautician because she's always fixing kids' hair, and she had curly, wavy hair, just like, and she's the only one that's got hair like I have. Of course, this is not all natural I've got now, but I had a lot of curl in my hair, and she did. And I told her, I said, Midge, when you get to graduate, I want you to find a beauty school and take a course in beauty work, because that's what you seem to apply yourself better. And I always wanted her to study music. And after she had about 6 years of music, then she didn't want any more of it. And she never plays the piano. She's had an organ and she's had a piano, but she gave the church, I think, the organ, and I don't know what she ever done for piano. And I don't know why, that she just never, I always wanted her to study music.
So you had plans for your daughters, even though during this particular era, most women got married and stayed home and had babies.
Yeah.
But you wanted, so you were different than most of your friends at the time? Did they expect different things out of their daughters or not?
I don't know whether you ever knew Attorney Roy Henry or not.
The name,
His wife and I were good friends. Merle and I were good friends. And she said to me one time, she said, Arthur, you give what you have to your children, and if there's anything left, they get it. And I said, well, I think that's what you're supposed to do. And she said, I can't do that. She just had one daughter, where I had four. And Carolyn wore her clothes, and she wore them to school. She didn't have any of her own. They couldn't buy them for both of them. Merle got them, the mother got them, and Carolyn done without.
Why do you think that was the case?
Why did I think?
Yeah, why did you think?
I just knew it wasn't.
No, why do you think she did that?
I don't know why she did. I don't know why Merle did that. To talk to her and to know her, she didn't seem to appear to be that kind of, but you'd have thought she'd have thought of her daughter, you know. I can understand. And Sally and Carolyn was always such good friends. That's my Sally, my baby. And Sally said, Mother said, you know, Carolyn used to wear her mother's clothes to school, and Merle had nice things, and she had nice permanents and everything. You know, back there, money was tight. There wasn't a lot of money. And you never seen a $20 bill. But
the fact that you wanted your daughters to have some type of career or some type of why was that important to you?
Well, I didn't want them to grow up and be little dummies and not do anything. I thought they ought to get out and do something, you know.
But wasn't that unusual for your time, in that most women just expected to just get married and have a family?
Maybe so, but not mine, because I wanted them to have more than I had. I wanted their life to be different.
Did you ever work outside the home?
Oh, yes. When they got up big enough to, now Leslie Ann, my granddaughter, I call her mine, and when she was a baby, I kept her while her mother, Ivis, worked. So I stayed at home and took care of the baby. But then after Ivis went to housekeeping and everything, well, I worked for a long time at Gabler's, and I loved my work. And
Gabler's was a dress shop
department
here,
store,
department store. I remember it vaguely.
And then I worked at the Ironton High School in the cafeteria, you know, for 10 years.
What was your wages at the time?
Well, when I worked at Gabler's, when it started out, it was 75 cents an hour, but I finally made $1 an hour. That was a lot of money.
And this was in when?
Oh, golly, that's been 35 years ago. I don't really, I'd have to.
So in the 50s, you worked for them in the 50s?
And that's when I worked at school. Of course, I made more money than at the school. But when I got the last raise at the school, and it was worthwhile, you know, made it worthwhile. I'd never had a job that I made a lot of money, and you just didn't make it, did you? Then Les got so sick that I had been. He didn't get any better. He was sick for 6 years, and so I took care of him. I stayed home. I could have gotten somebody to come in and look after him and supply his needs, what he really needed. But it wasn't somebody there with him, and when he was lonely and felt bad, so I just quit my job, and I thought, if things work out, I can go back to work and find another job if anything happens. So, but after he passed away, I wasn't able to work. I was tired and wore out, and I just didn't work just occasionally now and then when I took an ocean fun.
Because you enjoyed it as much as anything?
I wanted to. But that's the way I felt about it. I didn't want nobody to go in and take, he wouldn't have been happy, and so why make him his last days miserable, you know. I tried to make him as happy because he had he knew he had cancer, and he knew he wasn't going to live, and that wouldn't be to to my own self. When you apply that to your own self, you know, you think differently. You think, don't have very long, and how can you live with that? And so I wanted to make it as pleasant as I could. So
well, it sounds like you've devoted your life to taking care of other people in one way or another, whether it was your daughters or your husband or your home.
My girls never had a child that I wasn't with them. Wherever I went to Evansville, Indiana, to Midges, and stayed with her. And they moved there when he was transferred one time, and I went and cleaned the house and got it all straightened out for him, cleaned the windows and everything. Go and take care of the babies and take care of my next door neighbor's babies.
How would you most like to be remembered? What would you like to be remembered for?
Oh, what would I like to be remembered for? Being a good mother. I reckon that'd be the only thing I can think of. If my girls can just look at me and say, or if my son-in-laws can look at me and say, you've been good to me.
We know something tells me that's just exactly how they feel. I'd say that with the time that you've given them.
They hug me and kiss me when they come in, just like they did their own mother. None of them's got a mother now. And, well, Bill Cook's mother's still living, but she's not too well. And, maybe I sure love more love toward him than she does. She loves her kids, but in a different way. You know, and I'm more outgoing. I just love my boys, and I always liked to have had a boy of my own, and I didn't have, and they're good to me, and so why wouldn't I? Oh, I love them. Well, I never go up there that he don't say, Granny, Midge and I are going to go. We want to go get you a new pair of shoes, and Bill, I don't need any shoes, and he said, well, you may need them someday, or we want to go and buy you a new dress or something, you know.
Well, Orpha, I really appreciate you taking the time to let me interview you this afternoon, or this evening, actually. You've been very cooperative. I've learned a lot about your life, and I just want to thank you for giving me this evening.
Well, I appreciate you. That was good.
Okay.
Let me mind.
Mommy and 4 baby.